Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a
What's
light
your
on
story?
incredible impact. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission? Welcome all to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I'm your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, and a power wheelchair user. I'm the Community Relations Manager at accessiBe and a passionate disability rights advocate and trial attorney, focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today on accessiBe Spotlight Sessions, we're joined by Mik Scarlet, the co-CEO of PHAB Ltd. Welcome, Mik.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We used to be PHAB Ltd, which stood for something very outdated that I won't mention. We're now called PHAB, so it's like we're like something coming from sort of Austin Powers. Now we're kind of PHAB, baby. So that's what we are now. But yeah, that's it. That's my current position. My career has been long and tortuous and weird. So, which I'll tell you probably more about that as we go along.
I love it, Mik. Well, let's dive right into it. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I was been disabled since birth. I was born with a very rare type of cancer called a neuroblastoma, an adrenal neuroblastoma, and I can only be described as really, really lucky that one, it was found before it had entered my spinal column, which it tends to do, so it makes it quite tricky to treat. But also I was taken to hospital and the doctor that saw me had read in the Lancet, which is a British kind of medical journal, the week before that Pfizer were looking for babies or children under the age of 5 that had this type of cancer to test a new drug on. And so I was put on the trial. There were 6 of us, and we all survived. Up until then, it was very, very rare to survive. So we became kind of leaders in a new generation of people that sort of grew and grew and grew, the number of people surviving this cancer. But it did mean that I was a guinea pig. So I ventured off into the world with a leg brace, what we used to call a caliper, made out of metal rods that bolted onto my right leg and a bit of a limp, and went out into the world, went to a mainstream school, kind of did all the things that, you know, non-disabled kids do. Just I had a tricycle, they had a bike. I could get out of doing PE if I wanted to by pulling a sad little face and looking kind of like, oh, it's a bit cold outside. And they used to try and make me do sport, but then my caliper would rust because it was made out of steel, like iron, not steel. So I would get out of it. But then when I was 15, an unforeseen side effect of the treatment came to roost. I've been quite a short child, but the Irish in me kicked in when puberty kicked in, and I shot up like a rocket, and the base of my spine had deformed because of the combination of radiotherapy and chemotherapy, an unforeseen side effect of the drug that they now know happens but didn't know before. So I basically woke up one morning to go to school and said to my mum, my leg hurts. And by the time I got to school, I couldn't walk anymore. I was rushed to hospital and my spine had just collapsed on the way to school. So I left hospital 9 months later as a wheelchair user and have been living on wheels ever since. So that's my sort of medical story. My career has, like I said, been equally weird. Before I became a wheelchair user, I was a working class kid from a working class family, sort of lower working class, wasn't much money, and really was brought up to believe, get a good job, you can do what you like once you're earning money. So I studied hard, I got lots of exams, I got lots of job offers, but my spine collapsed just as I was about to leave school. So all of these job offers went poof and vanished. No one wanted to employ a disabled person. And so I thought I'm going to follow my dream. And my dream had always been to be a musician. When I was a teenager, Ian Dury was big in the charts in the UK. And he basically had calipers on his leg like I had. So I was like, oh, wow, he's like me. I could be a pop star. But don't be stupid. Get a gateable job. Get a job in a bank. Job in a bank. Good job. A draftsman. You could be a draftsman because they sit down all day. And that means you wouldn't have to do much walking. There's still stuff like this as a kid. And so then I kind of went to my parents, I'm going to pursue my dream. So I did music and I really went for it. And I got quite big. My bands got quite popular. We never got a record deal because every record company went, can't see a teenage girl putting posters of a bloke in a wheelchair on their wall. But from that, I got spotted by a TV producer and he offered me a job in television. So in 1989, I became a TV producer, and by 1990, the shows I were doing were being sold globally. So they were syndicated all over the sort of English-speaking world. So America, Canada, Australia. So I was quite famous. I did TV for about 15 years. Then I was ill, and when I came back, I typically was ill during the transition from no internet to internet. And so the world completely changed and people couldn't, the industry suddenly started looking online for talent. So it meant that if you didn't exist, if you worked before the world of the internet, you didn't kind of exist. So I had to try and rebuild a career that it was very difficult to do. There were also nice looking young people, and I was now a middle-aged type person in 30s, which of course is ancient in television. So I retrained and I became an access consultant. I went to university and studied sort of inclusive design and the planning system and stuff like that, and worked in construction, helping developers build accessible and inclusive environments.
You've been on quite a journey.
I haven't even finished yet, mate. That's the thing. That when you ask me, like, what do you do, or what you tell me, it's like I can probably talk for the whole show. But I think that, so from there, I then started realizing that people in the construction industry didn't know about what I was doing. So I started training. So I taught people that were going into my industry about what I was doing. So I didn't have to keep arguing with architects about designs they'd already done. I was trying to get them before they made the mistakes that they were making. That then led to me working in, like, expanding my training portfolio to train people in practice. So how do you employ disabled people? How do you make policy more accessible and inclusive? And that led to things like training the Welsh Government. I've just done a project training the Welsh Government on
tell me more about how PHAB came about.
Well, and then so there you go. So then I ended up. I've been working with PHAB as a volunteer for many years. It's a charity that I supported. When I went in my chair, all my friends disappear. You know, you know the same thing. When you're newly disabled, you kind of lose your gang. They all don't know what to say. They feel uncomfortable. So you end up, a lot of your friends disappear, especially because I was at school. So that was at that point where my friends probably would have disappeared a bit anyway, because you all go off in different directions. So I had nowhere to go. I didn't know what to do. So I went to a PHAB club near me. And the PHAB clubs are basically where disabled and non-disabled people get together and kind of mix and have fun. It was a little bit old-fashioned when I went in the 80s, but it was the stepping stone for the rest of my life. And it kind of gave me that idea, well, I can do stuff. And I don't necessarily want to go to somewhere where it's sort of put on for you. I want to go and make my own fun. So I went off and, went to clubs and pubs and DJ'd and sang in bands and had loads of fun.
Can you tell me a memorable story or moment of a PHAB Club event or any PHAB Club story?
Well, to tell you the truth, one of the reasons why because the CEO job came up and I thought I'd apply because I wanted to apply my knowledge from my practice to a charity. And I knew that the people in PHAB wanted to do it. And I think one of the reasons why, there's a fantastic video online of a flying day that we put on with another charity that sort of allows people who haven't flown before to fly. And we sent up a load of disabled kids and their families, and they all had a go at flying. And one of the kids that flew was a visually impaired teenager. And when you see it, you can see that this is something as a blind child that she was probably told she'd never do. Like light-hearted way that people talk to you, well, you're never going to play for England, are you, Mick? That kind of thing. And she flew a plane. The pilot let her have a go, talked her through what she needed to do, and she basically flew. And when she landed, you could just see she was beaming. But not only was she beaming because she'd done this thing, but because she had that moment like I had, where it was like, actually, I can do anything. That this is a springboard into knowing that the future isn't as bleak as society tells you. And I think that captures more of what PHAB is about than any other thing, I think. That idea that there are people maybe that really just want a nice, safe environment, and we provide that. And that can be kids all the way up to, kind of octogenarians who just want to go somewhere and get on with people they like, and they know it's accessible, and they know people understand that some people are disabled and some aren't, and everyone's nice. But there are other people that want that jump off to go into the world and push the boundaries further. And we do that too. And I think that my focus with PHAB is going to be making more of that element so that we still provide all the things we've always provided. It's a charity that's been running for 65 years here in the UK. But I want to get it so that in the next 65 years, one, it's run more by disabled people, but two, that it encompasses the wants and needs of all of us. And some of us want to go to a club and feel safe and secure and go every week and know everyone. Others of us want to go down the pub or off clubbing or to the football or whatever. And we want to provide those as well. So that's the next step. And it's what's in the planning now.
That's powerful.
That's the story. I think if you see that video, there's a moment she gets out of the plane. One, she's like terrified. Then she realizes she's doing it. Then she gets out of the plane, and you can just see her face just go, there's nothing. That's it. I now know. All the stuff I've been told by mum and dad and the school.
Well, and it makes the next obstacle, the next challenge that much easier to overcome by just having an experience like that. But I'd love to know what first comes to mind for you when you hear the word accessibility.
I think the thing is, we live in a society now, like globally. I think the West especially is trying to push for equality and diversity, and I think that for most other minority groups, we're talking about a change in mindset. But for disabled people, we're talking about a change in how things are done too. So we need to whether it be a building that for you and I on wheels we can get in, whether it's a toilet that I can use or a toilet that you can use. We're just because we're wheelchair users, we don't need the same stuff. So there's understanding that what we've got to start doing is designing a future that says we can build a better tomorrow that makes everybody less disabled by the world they live in. I very strongly subscribe to the social model of disability that says I am not disabled by my body. I am disabled by a world that treats me different because of my body. Not being able to do something, not being able to do something physically or mentally is not as much of a barrier as it, there are things we can't do. I doubt very much that my example of a visually impaired pilot would really have take off in the airline industry, for example. If nothing else, that I think most people would be quite scared if a pilot came on with a guide dog. But it's still, there are ways of doing it. And actually, you and I know that you can modify the world and think differently, think outside the box, and make so much more accessible than it is if you just narrowly think the world is done for people who walk and see and hear and think, and the mainstream normal people. If you tear that up and say accessibility is thinking that building a tomorrow where everybody can have the same opportunity to end up in the same place, but how they get there might be different. That's what I think about when I think about accessibility.
And then when it comes to the business world, you talked about society making modifications and being more welcoming, providing kind of the ability to everybody can have the same opportunities. What about in the business world? What do you think the businesses can do to bring more accessibility and inclusion into the world?
Oh, do you know what? I think one of the big ones is tear up that stereotype. Don't think that we aren't customers. Don't think that we aren't really valued employees. I think that alone is the big thing that business could do. Whenever I go into a business to try and support them to become more inclusive of the disabled community, that's my big sell. Is one, we are a massive market. I did an event in global tourism, and the disabled pound, the purple pound as it's called here, I don't know if it's called the same way you are, but the purple pound in tourism is worth $1.4 trillion a year in tourism. And they're not, and yet tourism is one of the most awful experiences. Whenever you try to go anywhere in the world, it's a nightmare. So that's a massive market they're missing out on. So we are valued and really important customers, because one of the things is I've found, and I think it's been found by studies as well, is we are very loyal. If we find a business that is good, that does good service, good products, gives us what we want and treats us as valued customers, we don't go anywhere else. We don't go, I'm going to try another one. We just stick because we know it's safe, because we're so used to being rejected and having a difficult time. So if you get it right, we'll come back time and time.
You get customers for life, and then you get them to recommend it to their friends, their family, their communities.
It's funny how the social media has now opened the world up. Once upon a time, when I first became disabled, people would come up and go, oh, do you know they're a wheelchair user? And you'd be like, we don't all know each other, Now we do. Like we met, when did we meet? Social media. How we all meet online now. So actually our community has become global. And as you say, if one person has a good experience, they post it, they make films of their experience, they make, they tell the world, and other people follow. And the same goes for the bad experiences. I don't know if you've been following any of the stuff in the UK about flying recently that people like Sophie Morgan have been pushing. Sophie is highlighting something that I experienced. I first flew in 1986, and my wheelchair was broken both ways on that journey. And ever since then, I'd probably say more often than not, my chair comes back to me broken on one of the flights in and out, let alone lost or whatever.
And that narrative has to change in it, and it needs to change a lot faster than it is. But Mik, I got to thank you for being our guest today.
Have I talked too long? All of your questions that you sent me, I've only answered about 2 because I waffle like a complete maniac.
You've got a great story, and I thank you for answering the questions. But Mik, thank you so much for being our guest today on accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions.
Cool.
And for having your time and your wisdom shared. And to all of our guests, thank you so much for staying to the end to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow us at accessiB_community. And until next time, thank you so much for being on this journey with us. Take care, everyone.
Bye.